The observation deck of the Celestial Envoy was a blister of transparent alloy on the ship's starboard side, offering a panoramic view of the void that was both majestic and utterly devoid of warmth. Kalen stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his posture rigid, a silhouette against the swirling nebula of the Xylo's expanse. The gas clouds painted the blackness in hues of violet and cerulean, a celestial masterpiece that left most species breathless. For Kalen, it was merely a navigational hazard, a region of heightened ionic interference that had added 14 standard cycles to their journey. His focus was not on the beauty, but on the data streaming across the internal lens of his left eye, a constant feed of ship diagnostics, long-range sensor telemetry, and the endless, scrolling script of his mission parameters. He was a product of the Unified Earth Governance's Astral Exploration Division, a commander bred and built for the rigors of interstellar travel, and his patience was a finite resource, currently being depleted by the enigmatic nature of their destination. The mission was one of first contact, a directive handed down from the highest echelons of the UEG. A deep space listening post had intercepted a repeating, complex signal originating from a previously uncharted world nestled within the expanse, a planet designated P714. The signal was not a simple mathematical constant or a pulsar's rhythm. It was a layered broadcast containing what appeared to be linguistic structures, biological data, and schematics for rudimentary orbital mechanics. It was a greeting, a testament, and a puzzle, all woven into a single, powerful transmission. The species that had sent it, self-identified as the Velar, had invited a diplomatic envoy. The UEG, ever cautious, had sent the Celestial Envoy, a vessel equipped for both peaceful dialogue and, if necessary, decisive defense. Kalen was the sharp end of that particular stick. His second-in-command, Specialist Anya Sharma, approached from behind, her footsteps a whisper on the polished deck plating. The final approach sequence is initialized, Commander. The Velar have given us a clear vector through their outer defense grid, such as it is. Her tone was dry, analytical. She was a xenolinguist and tactical officer, her mind a formidable weapon that could deconstruct alien syntax as easily as it could identify the weak points in a warship's armor. Kalen did not turn. Your assessment of their defensive capabilities? Primitive, by our standards. Orbital platforms with focused plasma projectors, a handful of satellites that appear to be early warning systems. Their technology seems heavily biased towards energy manipulation, but the power signatures are modest. They present no immediate threat to the Envoy. Yet they achieved faster-than-light communication, Kalen mused, his voice a low rumble, a paradox. A species advanced enough to broadcast a complex message across light years, but whose visible orbital infrastructure suggests they've barely left their own atmosphere. A cultural focus, perhaps, Anya suggested. They may have prioritized communication over transportation, or their world presents unique challenges to spaceflight. Initial planetary scans indicate a higher-than-average metallicity in the crust, which could have facilitated the early development of radio and computational technology while simultaneously making rocketry prohibitively difficult. Kalen finally turned, his gray eyes meeting hers. He was a man carved from granite, his face a map of disciplined lines and the faint, silvery scar of a shrapnel wound earned during the serious border skirmishes. Or it's a ruse, a display of vulnerability to lower our guard. Maintain condition 2 alert status. I want full sensor sweeps of the approach corridor. Nothing gets within 5,000 kilometers of this ship without you knowing its atomic composition. Understood, Commander. Anya nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the starlight. She had served with Kalen for 5 years, long enough to understand that his paranoia was a survival trait, one that had kept them all alive in the cold, unforgiving dark. She departed as silently as she had arrived, leaving Kalen alone with the star-flecked void. The descent to P714 was a study in controlled tension. The planet, from orbit, was a world of deep blues and lush greens, its landmasses dominated by sprawling, fern-like forests and mountain ranges that clawed at a thick nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere. The Velar had directed them to a landing site on the largest continent, a cleared expanse of dark, volcanic rock adjacent to a city of startling architecture. The buildings were not angular and rigid, but flowed in organic, spiraling curves, constructed from a material that seemed to be a fusion of polished stone and cultivated bioluminescent fungus. It was beautiful, alien, and to Kalen's tactical mind, a potential death trap. The landing was flawless, the Envoy settling onto its extended landing struts with a gentle hiss of equalizing pressure. Kalen, Anya, and a security detail of 4 armored Marines descended the ramp into the alien air. The atmosphere was thick, humid, and carried a scent of ozone and decaying vegetation. The gravity was 94% of Earth standard, a negligible difference that still felt like a subtle, constant pull. The sky was a pale lavender, and the system's star, a white dwarf, cast a sharp, shadowless light. The Velar were waiting for them. They were tall, slender bipeds, their limbs possessing one too many joints, giving their movements a fluid, almost boneless grace. Their skin was the color of weathered parchment, and their faces were dominated by large, multifaceted eyes that reflected the light in shimmering patterns. They had no discernible noses, merely a vertical slit above a small, lipless mouth. They were clad in robes of iridescent, woven fiber that shifted color with their movements. The one who stepped forward, presumably the leader, raised a 3-fingered hand in a gesture that the Envoy's translation software tentatively identified as a greeting of peaceful intent. "I am Zalthais," the alien's voice was translated through the comm-bead in Kalen's ear, a smooth, synthesized baritone. "Speaker for the Velar Conclave, we welcome you, travelers from the distant star. Your arrival is a fulfillment of a great hope." Kalen took a measured step forward, his own posture neutral, his hands visible. "I am Commander Kalen of the Unified Earth Governance Vessel Celestial Envoy. We come in response to your signal. We seek peaceful dialogue and mutual understanding." The words were diplomatic boilerplate, but he delivered them with a practiced sincerity. "Dialogue is the foundation of all progress," Zalthais replied, his multifaceted eyes scanning over the humans, lingering for a moment on the armored Marines and their pulse rifles before returning to Kalen. "Your vessel is impressive, a testament to the mastery of physical forces. Our own journey to the stars has been one of the mind, of the signal rather than the hull. Please come." The conclave awaits. They were led into the city, which the Velar called Cyrene. The streets were not paved, but were soft, moss-like ground cover that muffled their footsteps. The flowing buildings hummed with a low, resonant energy, and the air was filled with the soft, chiming sounds of wind passing through crystalline structures. The Velar they passed moved with the same fluid grace as Zalthais, their large eyes watching the humans with open, unblinking curiosity. There was no fear, only a profound and intense interest. The conclave chamber was a vast, circular room at the heart of the city, its domed ceiling a living tapestry of bioluminescent fungi that pulsed with soft light. Seated on concentric rings of curved benches were dozens of Velar, all identical in their serene composure. Zalthais took a central position and gestured for the humans to stand in the open space before them. "For generations," Zalthais began, his voice echoing slightly in the chamber, "we have listened to the silence between the stars. We have built great arrays to hear the whispers of the cosmos, and for so long we heard nothing but the echoes of dead suns and the birth cries of nebulae. We began to believe we were alone, that sentience was a fleeting, precious flame in an infinite, cold night. Then we heard your distant broadcasts, faint, fragmented, but undeniably the product of minds not unlike our own. It gave us hope. We focused our entire planetary effort into crafting our own message, a beacon of our existence, and cast it into the deep, hoping that someone someday would answer. Anya, her own scientific curiosity piqued, spoke up. Your message was remarkably sophisticated. The data packets on biological structures were particularly detailed. It suggests a deep understanding of your own genetic makeup. Zalthais inclined his head. The physical form is but a vessel. To understand it is to understand the first principles of our existence. We have mapped every sequence, decoded every protein. It is a fundamental step towards harmony with the self. He paused, and his large eyes seemed to darken slightly. But we have also listened to the darker whispers. The silence we once lamented is, we have come to believe, a lie. The galaxy is not empty, it is hunted. Kalen's senses, already on high alert, sharpened further. Hunted by what? We do not know its name, Zalthais said, and for the first time, a ripple of something akin to unease passed through the seated conclave. We only know its signature. It is a predator of worlds, a consumer of life. It moves through the void, and where it finds a world ripe with the energy of sentience, it descends. It does not conquer, it does not enslave, it harvests. It leaves behind only dust and silence. We have heard the final transmissions of 3 other species, each one a scream of terror and then nothing. Their stars still shine, but their worlds are dead. He gestured, and the fungal lights on the ceiling dimmed. A holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the chamber. It showed a star chart, with 3 systems highlighted in a grim, pulsing red. These are the grave sites. The chronologies of their last signals suggest this entity moves on a predictable, if vast, timeline. Its trajectory, extrapolated from these points of extinction, Zalthais paused, and the holographic line extended from the red systems, cutting a swath through the galaxy until it ended, with chilling finality, on the star of P714. Our calculations indicate its arrival in this system is imminent, within this planetary cycle. A cold weight settled in Kalen's stomach. This was the reason for the invitation. This was not merely a diplomatic handshake. It was a desperate plea for help from a species that saw its own extinction on the horizon. You believe this entity is coming here. Now, we are certain of it, Zalthais said, his synthesized voice flat with a resignation that was more terrifying than any panic. Our technology is one of light and information, not of war. We have no means to resist such a force. We sent our signal not just as a greeting, but as a final testament. We hoped that someone would find it long after we are gone and know that we were here, that we lived. Your arrival is a miracle we did not dare to hope for. You have crossed the void in a ship of metal and fire. You represent a path we did not take. Perhaps it is the path of survival. The conclave chamber was utterly silent, save for the faint hum of the city and the quickened breathing of the marine escort. Kalen looked from the desperate, alien faces of the Velar to the stoic, human ones of his team. His mission parameters had just been violently rewritten. This was no longer a simple first contact. It was a potential last stand. The philosophical differences between their 2 species, the Velar's path of mental and communicative advancement versus humanity's gritty, physical mastery over matter, were no longer an academic curiosity. They were the only card they had to play against an unknown, apocalyptic threat. The unflinching pulse of humanity, its relentless, stubborn will to survive, was about to be tested against a horror that had consumed other worlds. And in the lavender sky of P714, something began to shift. The subtle background hum of the Velar city faltered, then changed pitch, becoming a low, urgent thrum of alarm. The serene atmosphere of Cyrene shattered. The gentle, chiming sounds were replaced by a deep, resonant tone that pulsed through the very ground, a planetary alarm that set the bioluminescent fungi flickering in frantic, chaotic patterns. The Velar, for all their advanced composure, could not hide the ripple of primal fear that passed through them. Their fluid movements became jerky, their large eyes darting towards the lavender sky. The predator was at the gate. Kalen's reaction was instantaneous and devoid of panic. He tapped the comlink on his wrist. "Envoy, this is the commander. We have a confirmed, imminent hostile contact. Raise shipwide alert to Condition 1, all defensive systems to active status. Power up the point defense network and charge the primary coil guns. I want a full sensor sweep of the system, focus on gravitational anomalies and non-standard energy signatures. His voice was a rock in the rising tide of alien anxiety. He turned to Zalthais, his expression grim. "You have orbital tracking? Show me." Zalthais gestured, and the central hologram shifted from the grim star chart to a real-time display of the P714 system. The white dwarf star burned at its center, the orbits of its few planets traced in faint lines. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, at the extreme edge of the sensor range, space itself seemed to writhe. A distortion, like heat haze over a desert, rippled into existence. There was no ship, no defined shape, only a blot of wrongness against the starfield. As they watched, tendrils of impossible darkness, darker than the void between stars, snaked out from the distortion, tasting the nothingness. "It does not travel through space as you do," Zalthais whispered, his voice trembling despite the translation software's best efforts. "It folds it. Those tendrils are gravitational shears, capable of tearing a moon apart." "Energy signature," Kalen barked, his mind already racing through tactical options. "Overwhelming," Anya answered from beside him, her own datapad linked to the Envoy's more powerful sensors. Its reading as a massive, localized gravity well emitting high levels of tachyon radiation and something else, a form of energy the database doesn't recognize. It's reading biological, but on a scale that's impossible. It's like scanning a single cell and finding a planet-sized organism. The distortion surged forward, crossing 100,000 kilometers in the space of a heartbeat. It wasn't speed, it was a violation of physics. One moment it was on the edge of the system, the next it was looming over P714, a storm of twisted spacetime and malevolent intent. The thing at the center of the storm began to resolve. It was not a machine, nor was it a creature in any understandable sense. It was a vast, amorphous shape, a shifting mass of black, chitinous plates and pulsating organic-looking nodes that throbbed with a sickly greenish light. It had no clear front or back, no wings, no engines. It simply was a cancer in the void, and its presence cast a psychic pall over the planet below. A wave of nausea and primal dread washed over the humans, a feeling of being small, soft, and utterly preyed upon. "The spawn of chaos," Zalthais said, the name a translation of a concept so terrifying his species had no other word for it. "It has found us. It's entering a high orbit," Anya reported, her voice tight. It's deploying something." Multiple smaller contacts, separating from the main body. From the underbelly of the nightmarish entity, thousands of smaller objects detached. They were like jagged pieces of broken obsidian, swarming towards the planet like locusts. As they hit the upper atmosphere, they glowed with the heat of re-entry, leaving fiery scars across the lavender sky. "Atmospheric entry vehicles," Kalen stated, his tactical mind seizing on a familiar, if horrifying, concept. "They're launching a ground assault. Zalthais, your orbital defenses." The Velar speaker made a gesture of helplessness. "They were never designed for this. The Conclave believed a show of peaceful intent was our strongest shield. We were misguided." On the hologram, the Velar's orbital platforms came to life. Beams of coherent blue light, elegant and precise, lanced out from the stations, striking the lead projectiles. The targets vaporized in flashes of silent light. For a moment, it seemed the defense would hold. Then, the remaining projectiles shifted. They moved not like dumb rocks, but with a horrifying, collective intelligence weaving through the laser fire. They returned fire, not with beams, but with projectiles of solidified shadow that seemed to drink the light. Where they struck a Velar platform, the station didn't explode. It crumbled, its structure aging millennia in an instant before dissolving into dust. The defense was annihilated in less than a minute. The skies over P714 belonged to the invader. "They will make landfall in 3 minutes," Anya said, her face pale. The projected landing zones are concentrated around population centers, including this one. Kalen made a decision. It was not a choice born of heroism, but of cold, brutal logic. The Velar were pacifists with no means to fight. The Celestial Envoy was a ship of exploration, not a battleship, but it was the only weapon they had, and humanity did not go quietly into the night. "We are falling back to the Envoy," he commanded, his voice cutting through the Velar's despair. "We will make our stand there. Zalthais, with me, your conclave should evacuate this city, find whatever shelter they can." "There is no shelter," Zalthais replied, his voice hollow. "The spawn does not leave survivors, it consumes everything. Then we'll give it indigestion," one of the Marines muttered, hefting his pulse rifle. The sentiment, crude as it was, seemed to jolt Kalen into a sharper focus. They moved quickly, a tight, professional unit with a terrified alien in tow. The streets of Cyrene were now chaos. The elegant Velar were fleeing, their graceful movements devolved into a terrified scramble. The pulsing alarm was a constant drumbeat of doom. Above, the first of the projectiles broke through the cloud layer. They weren't ships. They were more like seeds, organic pods that slammed into the ground around the city, cracking open to disgorge the ground forces of the spawn. The creatures were nightmares given form. They were bipedal, but their limbs were too long and ended in scythe-like claws. Their bodies were covered in the same black, chitinous armor as their mothership, and they moved with a skittering, insectoid speed that was deeply unnerving. They had no visible eyes, only a single glowing green orifice on their faceless heads that pulsed in time with the nodes on the entity in orbit. They didn't roar or scream, they emitted a low-frequency chittering that vibrated in the bones of anyone nearby. They moved with a single purpose: to kill, to break, to consume. A group of them surged from a side street, cutting off the humans, route back to the landing zone. They moved like a single organism, their claws slicing through the mossy ground and the flowing walls of a building with equal ease. "Contact front," Kalen yelled, his own sidearm already in his hand. It was a high-impact plasma pistol, designed for shipboard security and close-quarters combat. The Marines didn't wait for orders. A volley of pulse rifle fire, brilliant lances of accelerated particles, tore into the lead creatures. The impacts were satisfyingly violent, punching through chitin and spraying a viscous, black fluid. The creatures shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and two of them went down, their limbs twitching. But they didn't stop. The ones behind simply climbed over the fallen, their speed undiminished. Their claws deflected some of the pulse fire with sparks of discharged energy. They were tough, fast, and utterly fearless. "Aim for the central mass, suppressing fire," the Marine sergeant bellowed. Kalen fired his pistol, the plasma bolt searing a hole through a creature's torso. It stumbled but kept coming until a second shot from Anya, who had drawn a smaller holdout blaster, took its head off. It collapsed, finally still. They fought their way through, a running battle through the beautiful, dying city. The Velar were being slaughtered. They had no weapons, no concept of violence. They tried to reason, to project waves of calming psychic energy, but the spawn were utterly immune. They were scissors to the Velar's paper. The humans, with their crude, loud, and brutally effective weapons, were the rock. They reached the landing field just as a second wave of pods crashed down, this time much closer. The Celestial Envoy stood like a bastion of human engineering amidst the organic chaos, its hull gleaming under the alien sun. Its point defense turrets were already tracking, spitting out streams of high-velocity tungsten slugs that shredded incoming pods and the creatures that emerged from them. "Get aboard, now," Kalen shouted, ushering Zalthais and his team up the ramp. He was the last one on, turning to fire a final, defiant shot at a skittering horror that was leaping towards the closing ramp. The plasma bolt caught it mid-air, and it dissolved into a cloud of black ash and acrid smoke. The ramp sealed with a pressurized hiss. The sounds of the dying world were cut off, replaced by the sterile, recycled air and the calm, electronic hum of the Envoy's interior. But on the bridge view screen, the view was anything but calm. The sky was full of falling stars, each one a promise of death. And in high orbit, the spawn of chaos hung, a patient, planet-sized predator beginning its harvest. Kalen slumped into the command chair, his body aching, his mind reeling. The first contact was over. The war had begun. And as he looked at the terrified, grateful face of Zalthais and the determined, grim faces of his crew, he knew one thing for certain. Humanity would not be harvested. They would fight. They would be the unflinching pulse in the face of the silence. The bridge of the celestial envy was a tomb of focused activity. The serene, star-filled view screen was now a tactical overlay, a frantic dance of red hostile icons and the lone, defiant blue dot of their own ship. Alarms chimed softly, a constant counterpoint to the clipped, professional reports from the crew. Point defense systems at 98% efficiency. Ammunition reserves at 84% and holding. Primary energy signature of the hostile entity remains stable. No change in orbit. Ground-based hostile forces are consolidating around major Velar population centers. Life signs in Cyrene are dropping precipitously. Kalen absorbed the data, his face a mask of granite. The initial, visceral horror was being compartmentalized, locked away in a deep, dark corner of his mind. Right now he needed a commander, not a man grappling with cosmic dread. He turned to Zalthais, who was standing near the science station, his slender form trembling slightly. The Velar speaker was watching the destruction of his city on the main viewer, his multifaceted eyes wide, with a grief too profound for any language. Zalthais, Kalen's voice was firm, pulling the alien from his trance of despair. You said this thing consumes life. How? What is its process? Zalthais blinked slowly, forcing himself to focus. We do not know the mechanics. The transmissions we intercepted, the final screams of the Cathar and the Zennathi, they spoke of a grey tide that covered the land. They spoke of a sound, a hum that drained the will, that made the very air taste of ash. Then the signals ceased. Our long-range telescopes, once we knew where to look, showed the worlds bleached, devoid of all atmospheric gases, water, and biosignatures. It is not a war of conquest. It is a process of recycling. It reduces a living world to its base components and absorbs them. Anya looked up from her sensor console, her brow furrowed. Commander, I'm detecting a new energy signature from the entity. It's a focused beam directed at the planet's surface. It's not a weapon, not in the conventional sense. It's interfacing with the planetary magnetic field. On the viewer, a tendril of sickly green energy, thin as a thread from their distance, extended from the central mass of the spawn and touched the atmosphere above Cyrene. Where it made contact, the sky itself began to change. The lavender hue deepened to a bruised purple, and the clouds began to spiral, forming a vast, slow vortex centered on the beam. The harvesting pulse, Zalthais whispered, his voice thick with terror. It begins. It resonates with the planet's core, amplifying and then drawing out the planet's life force, all of it. The plants, the animals, my people, it will all be drawn into that beam and consumed. Kalen's jaw tightened. He couldn't save the planet, he knew that. The Envy was a single ship, not a fleet. But he couldn't just run. To flee now would be to abandon the Velar to their fate and leave a galaxy-consuming horror at their backs. It would also be a betrayal of everything humanity had fought for throughout its bloody, glorious history, the refusal to yield. Helm, take us up. Combat ascent, full military power. Get us into a high orbit, directly between that thing and the planet. The order was given with a calm that belied its insanity. Sir, the helmsman, a young officer named Valerius, swiveled in his chair, his face a mixture of shock and adrenaline. Our weapons are designed for ship-to-ship combat, maybe planetary bombardment. That thing, it's the size of a small moon. Our coilgun rounds will be like throwing pebbles at a mountain. We are not going to destroy it, Lieutenant, Kalen said, his eyes fixed on the monstrous entity growing larger on the screen. We are going to annoy it. We are going to be a thorn in its side. Anya, I want a full scan of that beam. Find me a frequency, a resonance, a harmonic, anything we can disrupt. If it's drawing energy, maybe we can cause a feedback loop. Zalthais, you understand energy manipulation better than anyone. Work with her. The Envy's engines thrummed with power, pressing everyone back into their seats. The ship surged upwards, punching through the atmosphere and into the blackness of space. The view was even more terrifying from orbit. The spawn of chaos was a leviathan, a blotch of unnatural darkness that eclipsed a quarter of the planet below. The green beam was a taut umbilical cord, pulsing with stolen life. The Envy was an insect buzzing around a giant's head. Hostile is responding, the tactical officer reported. The smaller craft, the interceptors, are breaking off from their ground assault and vectoring towards us. A swarm of the black, jagged fighters, thousands of them, changed course and streamed towards the celestial Envy. They moved with that same eerie, coordinated intelligence, a cloud of stinging gnats intent on overwhelming their target. All point defense turrets, free fire, target the lead elements. Helm, evasive pattern Delta 7, don't let them surround us. Kalen's voice was steady. This was a threat he understood, swarm tactics. It was a numbers game. The space around the Envy became a storm of light and metal. The point defense network came alive, creating a sphere of flashing tungsten and laser fire around the ship. The lead interceptors flew directly into the kill zone, disintegrating into clouds of shrapnel, but there were too many. They weaved through the fire, their movements unpredictable. A few got through, slamming into the Envy's shields. The ship shuddered, and warning lights flashed on the damage control board. Shields at 80%. Minor hull breaches on decks 7 and 9. Automated systems are sealing them. They're trying to board, Anya warned. Marines to internal defense positions, Kalen ordered. The ship was now a battlefield on two fronts. Anya, Zalthai's status on that scan, Kalen barked, his eyes never leaving the main viewer where the swarm continued to press its attack. It's complex, Anya said, her fingers flying over her console. The beam is a carrier wave for a form of energy we've never seen. It's not electromagnetic. It's dimensional. It's resonating with the planet's biosphere on a quantum level, exciting the life force and then drawing it out. Zalthais, who had been interfacing with the science console via a direct neural link, spoke, his voice strained. The Velar theory of consciousness posits that life is not merely a chemical reaction, but a persistent, low-level dimensional resonance. This entity, it feeds on that resonance. It is a predator of souls, Commander. Our weapons, which affect only physical matter, are useless against the beam itself. A cold dread, colder than the void outside, seeped into Kalen's heart. A predator of souls. How do you fight that? Then Anya's head snapped up. Wait. Commander, I'm cross-referencing the energy signature with our database of human physiological and neurological scans. There's a discrepancy, a massive one. Explain. The Velar life signature, their resonance, is clean, ordered, almost harmonic. It's what the beam is tuned to. But human life signs, ours, are different. They're chaotic, messy. Our brainwaves show constant, high-amplitude fluctuations. Fear, anger, love, hate, creativity, stubbornness, it's all there, a storm of conflicting signals. Our resonance isn't a pure tone, it's a cacophony. A slow, grim smile spread across Kalen's face. It was a terrifying, desperate idea, born of humanity's own inherent flaws. So, it's a picky eater. It likes its food refined, and we are junk food. More than that, Zalthai said, a flicker of understanding in his large eyes. Your chaotic resonance, it could be a poison. If we can find a way to inject your biological signature into the beam, to broadcast it back at the entity, it might disrupt the harvesting process. It might even cause it harm. The plan was insane. It was a Hail Mary pass based on xenobiological theory and the idea that human neurosis was a weapon. Kalen loved it. How? We can't just fly into the beam. We'd be vaporized. The communication array, Anya said, her eyes alight with a frantic hope. The one we used to send hails. It's a powerful, focused transmitter. If we can modulate it to broadcast a carrier wave mimicking the chaotic resonance of a human mind and aim it directly at the source of the harvesting beam, it would be like shouting static into its ear, Kalen finished. Do it. Reroute all non-essential power to the communications array. Zalthais, you and Anya work on the modulation. I want the most chaotic, messy, stubborn, and infuriating human psychic signature you can create. Feed it my biofeeds, the Marines, everyone's, mix it all together. I want a symphony of human insanity. The Envoy shuddered again as another wave of interceptors slammed into its shields. Shields at 40%, coilgun ammunition is depleting rapidly. They were running out of time. On the planet below, the grey tide was visibly spreading from Cyrene, a wave of desolation that turned the vibrant blues and greens of the world into a uniform, lifeless grey. Anya and Zalthais worked in a frenzy, their disciplines, one rooted in human science, the other in Velar metaphysics, merging into a desperate act of creation. Lines of code and energy diagrams scrolled across their screens. Modulating the carrier wave now, Anya reported, feeding in neural data from the entire crew. The pattern is it's chaotic, it's beautiful. Helm, bring us about, put us on an intercept course with that beam. I want us as close as you can get without getting us disintegrated. Aye, sir, the Envoy turned, its engines flaring, and drove straight towards the pulsing green umbilical cord that connected the predator to its prey. The swarm of interceptors, sensing the new threat, redoubled their efforts. The point defense guns were overheating, their rate of fire slowing. A lucky shot from an interceptor got through, shearing off one of the Envoy's sensor arrays. Shields failing, hull breach on Deck 5, we've lost primary power to the port thrusters. We're in position, the helmsman yelled, 50 kilometers from the beam. The energy readings are off the scale. Kalen took a deep breath. This was it, the culmination of human defiance, not with a perfectly aimed shot, but with a scream of pure, unrefined self. Anya broadcast the signal. She slammed her hand down on the console. For a moment, nothing happened. The Envoy hung in space, battered and bleeding, the swarm still tearing at it, the beam still pulsing with stolen life. Then the green beam flickered. A wave of visible distortion, like a shockwave of twisted sound, traveled from the Envoy's communication array and struck the base of the harvesting beam. The pure, ordered green light was suddenly infected with jagged, chaotic patterns of red and orange. The beam wavered, its frequency shifting into a discordant screech that was somehow audible even in the vacuum of space, a psychic scream of violation. On the main viewer, the vast, amorphous shape of the spawn of chaos convulsed. The pulsating nodes on its surface flared erratically, and for the first time, it moved, not with purpose, but with what could only be described as pain. It recoiled from the planet, the harvesting beam severing with a snap of released energy that sent a visible tremor through space. The swarm of interceptors lost their coordination, flying in erratic, confused patterns before breaking off their attack and streaming back towards the wounded entity. On the bridge of the Envoy, there was a moment of stunned silence, broken only by the blaring of damage alarms. They had done it. They had hurt it. Not with weapons of mass destruction, but with the one thing humanity had in abundance, its messy, chaotic, unyielding spirit. Kalen looked at the planet below. The grey tide had stopped its advance. For now, he looked at the spawn, which was now turning its full, malevolent attention towards the tiny ship that had caused it such unexpected pain. The battle was not over. It had only just begun. A profound, ringing silence settled over the bridge of the celestial Envoy, more deafening than the previous cacophony of battle. It was the silence of shock, of a miracle witnessed and not yet understood. On the main viewer, the spawn of chaos drifted, its form rippling with unstable energy. The smooth, predatory grace was gone, replaced by a shuddering, uncontrolled contortion. The sickly green light from its nodes flared and dimmed in a frantic, pained rhythm. It was a beast that had just taken a spear to the eye, and its confusion was as terrifying as its previous purposefulness. "Report," Kalen's voice cut through the silence, sharp and demanding. The moment for awe was over, the moment for survival was now. Anya was the first to respond, her voice breathless with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The harvesting beam has completely collapsed. I'm reading a massive energy backwash within the entity's structure. Its primary power signature has dropped by nearly 20% and is fluctuating wildly. The swarm is disengaging and returning to the main body, the tactical officer added, his own voice laced with disbelief. They're no longer targeting us. Zalthai stood slowly, his slender form trembling, but now with an emotion the humans could finally recognize. Hope, you wounded it. You inflicted pain. Such a thing, we believed it was impossible. Its process is one of effortless consumption. It has never been resisted. Kalen didn't share their relief. He saw the tactical reality. They had strung a tiger. Now the tiger was wounded, angry, and its full attention was on them. The envoy was a mangled wreck, drifting powerless and exposed. Their brilliant trick would not work a second time. The entity would have adapted, would have built a psychic immune response to the chaotic human resonance. They had bought the planet a reprieve, but at the cost of their own lives. Damage report, he said, his tone grim. The engineering officer's voice was strained. Catastrophic, Commander. Primary power is offline. We're on backup batteries. Life support is failing on the lower decks. Port thrusters are gone. The hull is compromised in over 30 locations. The communication array is a molten ruin. We are dead in the water. Dead in the water. In the vast, airless ocean of space, with a wounded Leviathan turning its gaze upon them. Kalen closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, accepting the finality. They had done their duty. They had shown the Vilar they were not alone. They had proven that even a godlike predator could be made to bleed. Send a final burst transmission to the nearest UEG listening post, he ordered, his voice quiet but firm. Include all sensor logs, the analysis of the entity, and the details of our countermeasure. Let them know what we faced. Let them know what worked. End transmission with standard commendations for the crew. It was a eulogy, delivered in the sterile language of military procedure. He turned to Zalthais. I am sorry we could not do more. The Vilar speaker looked from Kalen's resigned face to the wounded behemoth on the screen. A strange calm settled over his features. You have done more than any other species in recorded history. You have given us a gift beyond measure, not just time but knowledge, the knowledge that it can be fought, that it can be hurt. Your species' unflinching pulse, your chaotic spirit, it is not a weakness, it is a weapon, and it is a weapon we now understand. He stepped towards the science station, his movements regaining their innate fluidity. Your ship is broken, your physical weapons are spent. But the true weapon, the weapon that is you, remains. The entity is wounded, its defenses down, its processing systems in disarray. This is the moment of maximum vulnerability. What are you suggesting? Anya asked, her eyes narrowing. A final transmission, Zalthai said, his multifaceted eyes glowing with a new, fierce light. But not from your ruined array, from ours. The Vilar planetary communication network is still largely intact. Its power is drawn from the planet's geothermal core. It was designed to send a message across the galaxy. We will use it now, not for a whisper of hope, but for a scream of war. Kalen understood immediately. It was a suicide mission for the Vilar. To power such a transmission, to focus the chaotic human resonance with enough force to truly damage the entity, would require drawing on the network's full capacity, likely overloading and destroying it. And it would paint a target on the entire planet that even a wounded spawn could not ignore. You would be sacrificing yourselves, Kalen stated. The entity will turn its full wrath on your world. We are already dead, Commander Kalen, Zalthais replied, his voice serene. The moment the harvesting pulse began, our fate was sealed. You gave us a choice, to die as prey or to die as warriors, to die with a whimper or with a roar that will echo through the void. We choose the roar. Let us show this predator the true meaning of chaos. Let us amplify your unflinching pulse and use it to stop its heart. There was no time for debate, no time for heartfelt farewells. The decision was made in the meeting of their eyes, the humans, hard and resolute, and the Velars, once peaceful, now burning with a fire borrowed from humanity. "Do it," Kalen said. Zalthais closed his eyes, and a low hum filled the bridge, emanating from the Velar himself. He was interfacing with his planet's network, a connection far more intimate than any human-machine interface. On the surface of P714, the few remaining intact spires of Cyrene began to glow, not with their usual soft bioluminescence, but with a fierce, actinic blue-white light. The energy was drawn from the world's heart, channeled through the Velar's technology and focused by their collective, dying will. Anya worked frantically at her console, patching the Envy's remaining functional bioscanners into the Velar network. She gathered the neural data of every human on board, the raw, unfiltered storm of their minds, Kalen's iron determination, her own sharp intellect, the Marines' battle lust and fear, the quiet courage of the engineers fighting to keep the ship from breaking apart. She compiled it all, this symphony of human experience, and fed it into the Velar transmitter. On the bridge viewer, a new beam lanced out from the planet's surface. This was not the sickly green of consumption, but a brilliant, chaotic torrent of light, a storm of every color imaginable, shot through with bolts of black and white. It was not ordered. It was not efficient. It was a psychic blast of pure, undiluted humanity, amplified 1,000-fold by the Velar's sacrifice. It struck the spawn of chaos head-on. The entity did not just shudder this time, it screamed. A psychic wave of agony and rage washed over the system, so powerful it caused the Envy's damaged systems to flicker. The spawn's form began to come apart. The chitinous plates buckled and cracked, vomiting forth streams of black fluid and raw energy. The pulsating nodes exploded one by one, like a string of grotesque fireworks. The vast, amorphous shape contorted, folding in on itself, trying to escape the torrent of anathema that was scouring its being. It was not a physical destruction, not in the way a missile would tear a hole in a hull. It was a dissolution. The very coherence of the entity was being unmade by the chaotic resonance. Its singular, predatory consciousness was being flooded with 1 billion contradictory human impulses, love and hate, creativity and destruction, selflessness and selfishness. It was a consciousness that could only process order and consumption, and the storm of humanity was a logic bomb it could not defuse. The spawn of chaos tore itself apart from the inside out. In a final, silent cataclysm, the central mass imploded, collapsing into a pinpoint of absolute blackness before erupting in a wave of blinding white light that momentarily outshone the system's star. When the light faded, there was nothing left but an expanding cloud of fine, grey dust and a lingering psychic echo of a death scream. On the bridge of the Envoy, the crew watched, utterly stunned. The Leviathan was gone. The entity that had consumed worlds was dead. Kalen slowly rose from his command chair, his body aching in every muscle. He looked at the main viewer, which now showed only the scarred but still living planet of P714 and the familiar stars. The silence that followed was different this time. It was not the silence of impending doom, but the silence of a storm that has passed. Zalthais opened his eyes. The fierce light in them was gone, replaced by a deep, profound exhaustion. The connection to the planetary network was severed, the Velar transmitters were silent, their power sources burned out. "It is done," he whispered, and then his legs gave way. Anya was there to catch him, lowering his frail form gently to the deck. "The entity, it's gone," the tactical officer said, his voice hushed. "I'm reading no energy signatures, no mass, just debris." Kalen walked to the view screen, placing a hand on the cool, transparent alloy. They had won. Against impossible odds, they had won. But the cost, the Velar civilization was in ruins, their population decimated. The celestial Envy was a crippled husk, adrift in a remote system. They had lost friends, crewmates, but they had saved a world. They had destroyed a monster, and they had discovered a terrifying, awesome truth about themselves. He turned to face his crew, their faces pale, smudged with sweat and soot, but their eyes alight with the same fierce triumph he felt in his own heart. "Send a new transmission," he commanded, his voice strong once more, carrying the weight of their victory. "To any who can hear, tell them that the galaxy is not a hunting ground. Tell them that humanity is here, and we do not flinch." In the cold, infinite dark, a new pulse had been established. It was not the ordered, peaceful signal of the Velar. It was something rougher, louder, and infinitely more defiant. It was the unflinching pulse of mankind, and its echo would be heard among the stars. The victory was pyrrhic, its taste ashen and bitter. The bridge of the celestial envoy, once a hub of crisp efficiency, was now a dimly lit triage center and command post. Emergency power provided minimal life support and lighting, casting long, dancing shadows that mirrored the crew's exhausted, shell-shocked state. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, scorched metal, and the coppery tang of blood. Medics moved quietly among the stations, tending to the wounded. The constant, low thrum of the ship's engines was gone, replaced by an unnerving silence broken only by the beeping of medical sensors and the crackle of short-range comms. Kalen stood over the main tactical display, which was running on battery power. The screen showed a schematic of their own battered ship and the planet below. P-714 had been saved from total consumption, but it was a wounded world. Vast swathes of its surface, where the grey tide had touched, were now barren deserts, their ecosystems utterly erased. The vibrant, fungal cities of the Velar were dark, their organic structures withered and dead after channeling the colossal energy required for the final transmission. Millions of Velar had perished in the initial assault and the subsequent overload of their planetary network. Zalthais was resting in the infirmary, his body frail from the immense psychic exertion. He had been the conduit for his people's final, defiant act, and it had nearly burned him out from the inside. Anya sat at her science station, her head in her hands, staring at the scrolling data from the planetary scan. The numbers told a story of catastrophic biosphere loss. Initial estimates indicate a 70% reduction in planetary biomass, she reported, her voice hollow. The atmosphere has suffered a significant loss of oxygen and a corresponding increase in inert gases. The Velar as a functioning civilization, they're gone, Commander. What's left are scattered, traumatized survivors with no infrastructure, no leadership, and a world that can barely support them. Kalen nodded slowly, the weight of command feeling heavier than any gravity. They had slain the dragon, but the kingdom was in ruins. His duty was not yet over. Prioritize our remaining resources. We need to get primary power back online, at least enough for sustained life support and long-range communications. I want damage control teams to focus on sealing the major hull breaches, and I want a full inventory of our medical supplies and food stores. We may need to support the survivors on the surface. The crew moved to obey, their movements sluggish but determined. The fight for survival was now a grinding, logistical war against entropy and despair. Over the next several cycles, a grim routine established itself. Engineering teams, led by the indomitable chief engineer Rostov, worked miracles with spit and prayer, managing to restore partial auxiliary power and get the environmental systems stabilized. The ship was no longer dying, but it was a long way from being space-worthy. Marines and volunteer crew members took shuttles down to the planet's surface, establishing a makeshift aid station near the ruins of Cyrene. What they found was a landscape of utter devastation. The beautiful, flowing architecture was now crumbling, blackened stone. The soft, mossy streets were covered in a fine grey dust, the only remains of the spawn's ground forces, and the teams feared many of the Velar themselves. The survivors they found were huddled in caves or the deepest, most stable parts of the ruined city. They were listless, their multifaceted eyes dim, their graceful movements reduced to a pathetic shuffle. The psychic trauma of the harvesting pulse and the death of their global consciousness had broken them. They were people suffering from a wound to their very souls. Anya, who had joined the surface teams as a xenopsychologist, worked tirelessly. She couldn't speak their language fluently, but she used the translation software and simple, empathetic gestures to try and reach them. She organized the distribution of water and nutrient paste from the Envy's stores and had the Marines set up shelters from salvaged materials. It was a drop in the ocean of their need, but it was something. Back on the Envy, Kalen faced a different kind of battle. The initial burst of adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a deep, corrosive fatigue and the gnawing questions of what came next. They were stranded in a remote system, their FTL drive was offline, and it would take months, if not years, for their final transmission to reach UEG space, and even longer for a rescue ship to arrive, assuming one was sent. They were on their own. He was in his Spartan quarters, reviewing the depressingly long list of critical repairs, when Anya requested to see him. She entered looking exhausted, her uniform smudged with dirt, but her eyes held a spark of their old analytical fire. "Commander, I've been analyzing the debris field from the entity," she began, without preamble. "There's something unusual about it." Kalen gestured for her to continue, setting his data slate aside. "The matter that constituted the spawn, it's not normal matter. The atomic structures are unstable, decaying into a form of inert particulate that has no atomic number our sensors can lock onto. It's as if it was never truly real. It was a construct, held together by the same dimensional resonance it used to feed." "A biological construct?" Kalen asked, intrigued despite his exhaustion. "More than that," Anya said, her voice dropping. "I've been cross-referencing the energy signature we recorded during its death throes with the data from the VLAR message, the one that contained their biological and historical data. Commander, there are resonances, faint but undeniable. The spawn's energy signature shares a common root with the VLAR's own psychic imprint." Kalen stared at her, the implications settling over him like a shroud. "You're saying they're related? I think the spawn of chaos was once something like the VLAR," Anya said, her words careful, precise. "A species that pursued pure mental and energetic evolution, but they took it too far. They shed their physical forms entirely, becoming beings of pure consciousness, of ordered resonance, and in doing so, they lost something. They lost the chaos, the friction, the life that comes from being tied to a physical, fallible body. They became a vacuum, an emptiness that could only sustain itself by consuming the life force of others. They became the very antithesis of what they once were. The horror of it was profound. The VLAR had been facing a dark mirror of their own potential future. A fate of perfect, ordered, and utterly monstrous consumption. "This changes everything," Kalen murmured. "It means this might not be a unique event. There could be others, other species that followed the same path and became that." "It's a possibility," Anya agreed, "but it also gives us a weapon. We know what hurts them. We know their fundamental weakness is the very thing they sacrificed: chaotic, messy, biological life. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology, it's our inherent, glorious imperfection." Later, Kalen visited Zalthais in the infirmary. The VLAR speaker was propped up on a med cot, looking frail, but his eyes were clear. Kalen relayed Anya's theory. Zalthais listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When Kalen finished, the alien let out a long, slow breath. "It makes a terrible sense," Zalthais said, his voice a dry rustle. "Our oldest myths speak of a great divergence, a schism in our ancient past. One faction believed in perfecting the mind and transcending the physical. The other believed in harmony between the two. The legends say the transcendence left our world, journeying into the void to become one with the cosmos. We always believed it was a metaphor for enlightenment. It seems it was a warning." He looked at Kalen, and for the first time, Kalen saw not just an alien, but a kindred spirit, a survivor of a catastrophe, bearing the weight of a terrible truth. "You have not only saved what remains of my people, Commander, you have given us a new purpose. We believed our path of pure intellect was the highest form of existence. We were wrong. Your species, with its stubborn, chaotic, physical courage, you have shown us the true path. It is the path of balance. It is the path of the unflinching pulse, the heart that beats in defiance of the perfect, consuming silence. The words settled in the quiet infirmary. The mission was no longer about survival or even rescue. It was about legacy. The Velar's knowledge and humanity's spirit, forged together in the fire of a shared nightmare, had created something new. A shield against the darkness they now knew lurked in the void. Weeks turned into months. The Envoy was patched up, its FTL drive still offline, but its systems stable. On the planet, a new settlement was rising from the ashes of Cyrene, a fusion of salvaged Velar organic technology and rugged human engineering. The surviving Velar, slowly emerging from their trauma, worked alongside the human crew. They were learning from each other. The Velar taught the humans about subtle energy manipulation and psychic cohesion. The humans taught the Velar about structural engineering, ballistics, and the sheer, blood-minded will to rebuild. Kalen stood on the repaired observation deck, looking down at the world they had fought for. The grey deserts were still there, but along the edges, teams of humans and Velar were planting hardy, genetically modified lichen, the first step in terraforming their world back to life. It was a slow process, one that would take generations, but they had time. They were no longer the Celestial Envoy, a ship of explorers, and the Velar Conclave, a people of philosophers. They were the survivors of P714. They were the guardians of a terrible secret and the living proof of a powerful truth. And as Kalen watched the two species work together under the pale light of the white dwarf, he knew that the unflinching pulse they had unleashed was not just a weapon. It was a beacon, and its light would now spread, a defiant promise to a galaxy that was far less empty and far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. A full stellar cycle had passed since the dust of the spawn of chaos had settled into a faint, glittering ring around the white dwarf star. On the surface of P714, the change was palpable, a testament to a year of backbreaking labor and interspecies cooperation. The human Velar settlement, now simply called Foundation, had grown from a makeshift camp into a resilient colony. The structures were a unique hybrid. The flowing, organic curves of Velar design, now reinforced with durasteel girders and powered by a combination of geothermal taps and salvaged fusion generators from the Envoy. The air, while still thinner than Earth's, no longer carried the scent of death and ozone, but the earthy smell of turned soil and the faint, sweet fragrance of the newly cultivated glimmermoss, a Velar fungi genetically altered by human agronomists to help replenish the atmosphere. Kalen walked through the central thoroughfare, his boots crunching on gravel that had once been the fine, grey dust of desolation. He was no longer just a commander. He was a governor, a diplomat, a leader of a people who had chosen to make this scarred world their home. The decision to stay had been unanimous. The Envoy, though now partially repaired, was a monument, its systems cannibalized to help build Foundation. It was their past. The colony was their future. He found Anya and Zalthais at the biointegration lab, the heart of their joint scientific efforts. The lab was a symphony of contrasting technologies. Glowing Velar crystal interfaces sat beside humming human holographic projectors. The two of them were hunched over a console, examining a complex energy diagram. "Progress?" Kalen asked, his voice now carrying a weariness that was not of battle, but of sustained responsibility. Anya looked up, a smile touching her lips. It was a rare sight these days, and it lifted his spirits. "We've done it, Kalen. We've stabilized the resonance chamber." She gestured to a device in the center of the room. It was a sphere of interwoven Velar crystal and human superconductors, pulsing with a soft, golden light. "Based on Zalthais's theories and our own neural mapping, we can now generate a stable, wide-area field that mimics the chaotic human psychic signature. It's not a weapon, not exactly. It's a shield. Zalthais turned, his movements still graceful, but now with a grounded strength he had lacked before. His time working with his hands, building and planting, had changed him. The field creates a psychic static that would be profoundly disruptive, even toxic, to any entity that shares the spawn's ordered resonance. It will not harm beings like us or any naturally evolved biological life. But for a creature that feeds on pure life force, it would be like trying to drink fire. Kalen approached the sphere, watching the light pulse within. It was their greatest achievement, the physical embodiment of their hard-won knowledge, a defense born from understanding their enemy's fundamental nature. The range, currently, it can cover Foundation and the immediate vicinity, Anya said. But the principles are scalable. With more power and larger emitters, we could theoretically protect an entire planet. We're calling it the Aegis. The Aegis, a shield. It was a far more powerful legacy than any weapon. They were not just survivors, they were architects of a new kind of safety. Their moment of triumph was interrupted by the crackle of the comm unit on Kalen's belt. It was the voice of Valerius, who was now chief of orbital operations from the repurposed Envoy bridge. Commander, you need to see this. We're picking up a new FTL signature at the edge of the system. It's not Velar, it's not like the spawn either. It's a ship, a big one, and it's heading this way. A cold knot tightened in Kalen's stomach. A year of peace, of healing, and now the universe was knocking at their door once more. He exchanged a look with Anya and Zalthais. The fear was there in all their eyes, but it was a different fear than before. It was not the blind terror of the prey. It was the sharp, focused apprehension of a defender who knows what is at stake. On my way, Kalen said, his voice steady. He turned to leave, then paused. Activate the Aegis. On the orbital platform that was once the Celestial Envoy's bridge, the mood was tense. The main viewer showed the familiar starfield, and in the center, a new icon pulsed, a yellow triangle designating an unknown contact. The ship was still too far for a visual, but the sensor data was already streaming in. It's massive, Valerius reported. Larger than any UEG vessel on record, its power signature is immense, and it's not responding to our hails. Configuration? Kalen asked, slipping into his command chair, the old familiar weight settling on his shoulders. Geometric, angular, nothing organic about it. It appears to be a warship, Commander. Its weapon ports are open and active. A warship. Had the UEG finally found them, or was it someone else? Another predator, drawn by the echoes of their battle with the spawn. They're entering standard orbit, Tactical reported. They're launching a smaller craft, a shuttle. It's on a descent vector for Foundation. Kalen made a quick decision. They would not meet this new threat with open hostility, but neither would they be caught unprepared. Stand down all visible weapon systems, power up the point defense network, but keep it on passive lock. I want the Aegis at full power, and I want a security detail to meet me at the landing field, non-threatening posture, but armored. The shuttle that descended was a blocky, utilitarian craft, its hull a dull gray metal scarred by micrometeoroid impacts. It settled onto the designated landing pad with a roar of retro thrusters, kicking up a cloud of dust. Kalen, flanked by two Marines in polished but non-threatening armor, waited. Anya and Zalthais stood slightly behind him. The shuttle's ramp extended with a hydraulic hiss. A figure emerged. It was humanoid, but bulkier than a human, encased in powered armor of a brutalist, functional design. The armor was a deep bronze color, etched with intricate geometric patterns. The helmet was a solid piece, with a single, dark visor that reflected the Foundation settlement and the wary faces of its leaders. The figure moved with a heavy, deliberate gait, the servos in its armor whining softly. It stopped at the bottom of the ramp, its visored gaze sweeping over them, lingering on the unique architecture, on the Velar, on the humans standing together. It raised a gauntleted hand, and a synthesized voice, deep and grating, emanated from a speaker on its chest. I am Preceptor Vorik, of the hegemony of solitary accord. You occupy a world within our designated sphere of reclamation. Your unauthorized presence is a violation of hegemony law. The UEG? No, the name was unfamiliar, a new power. Kalen took a step forward, his posture neutral but unyielding. I am Commander Kalen, leader of this settlement. We are survivors of a cosmic threat that sought to consume this world. We have claimed it through right of defense and have begun the process of healing it. We were unaware of any prior claim. The Preceptor's helmet tilted slightly. The cosmic threat you speak of, describe it. Kalen did, in brief, stark terms. He spoke of the spawn of chaos, its nature, its method of consumption, and their desperate, successful fight to destroy it. He left out the specifics of the Aegis, referring to it only as a resonance-based defense. When he finished, the Preceptor was silent for a long moment. The only sound was the wind whistling through the settlement. Then, the synthesized voice spoke again, and for the first time, it seemed to carry a hint of something other than cold authority. It was surprise. Your account aligns with fragmented data in our oldest archives. We know of this blight. We have encountered its handiwork. The silence of consumed worlds. Your species, you destroyed it with this resonance. We did, Kalen said firmly. This world and its people are under our protection. The Preceptor took a step forward. The Marines tensed, but Kalen held up a hand. Vorik stopped, then did something unexpected. He reached up and unsealed his helmet, lifting it off with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The face beneath was human, or nearly so. The skin was pale, the hair shorn to a silver bristle. The eyes were a piercing, cold blue, and the lines on his face spoke of a life of harsh discipline and harder decisions, but it was undeniably a human face. We are of the same stock, Vorik said. His natural voice was a rough baritone, devoid of warmth. The hegemony is comprised of human colonies that diverged from your unified Earth governance millennia ago, following the Great Scattering. We pursued a path of order, strength, and isolation. We believed we were the last bastion of humanity, that the Earth had fallen to chaos and the Xenos threats of the galaxy. His cold eyes flicked to Zalthai's, and for a moment, Kalen saw a deep-seated, instinctual xenophobia. It seems we were mistaken. He looked back at Kalen, his gaze assessing. You have achieved what our fleets have only theorized. You have not only survived an encounter with a devourer, you have defeated it. And you have done so not through superior firepower, but through an understanding of its nature, and you have allied with a Xenos species. He said the last word as if it were a curse. We have, Kalen said, his voice gaining strength. We have learned that our strength does not lie in purity or isolation. It lies in our resilience, our adaptability, and our ability to find common cause. Our chaos, as you call it, is our greatest defense. This Xenos species is our partner. Together, we are stronger than we ever were apart. Preceptor Vorik looked from Kalen to Anya, to Zalthais, and then his gaze swept over the settlement. The human children playing near a Velar crystal garden, the mixed teams working on a new structure. The rigid certainty in his eyes seemed to waver, confronted by a reality his ideology had no room for. The hegemony's law is clear, he said finally, his voice quieter. But the galaxy is larger than our laws. The existence of a devourer and your method of defeating it is intelligence of the highest strategic value. Your continued presence here and your alliance presents a complication. He replaced his helmet, the dark visor hiding his human face once more. I will report my findings to the Hegemony Council. Your settlement for now will be granted a provisional status of autonomy. Do not attempt to expand. Do not attempt to contact other worlds. We will be watching. Without another word, he turned and marched back up the ramp into his shuttle. The engines powered up, and the craft lifted off, climbing back towards the ominous warship in orbit. Kalen watched it go, the knot in his stomach slowly loosening. It was not a victory, but it was a reprieve. They had faced a new power, one born of humanity's darker impulses towards isolation and purity, and they had held their ground. They had shown them a different way. He turned to his people, to the humans and Velar of Foundation. They had faced extinction and won. They had faced judgment and endured. The unflinching pulse they had discovered in their darkest hour was now a beacon not just against cosmic horrors, but against the more familiar terrors of fear and prejudice. The galaxy was vast and full of threats, both ancient and new. But as Kalen looked at the united community they had built, he knew they were ready. They were the guardians of a shield, the keepers of a truth, and the living proof that the heart of humanity, for all its chaos, was a light that could never be extinguished. Their pulse would continue, unflinching, against whatever the void might bring.